So welcome everyone. This is our first webinar in the Live, Inspire and Value for Liver Health series that the Fatty Liver Foundation hosts. It's the first one for 2026, and we're really excited to have representatives from Madrigal giving us their perspectives on steatotic liver disease. Bill and Chris, I'll formally invite you, but welcome to our webinar.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks so much, Niraj.
Excellent. So as many of you know, this webinar series that the Fatty Liver Foundation conducts it has now become an annual program of ours, and it is with the support of Madrigal that we can actually run this webinar series. So thank you guys for once again supporting us and helping us bring information to patients. This is our disclosure and disclaimer statements. As you know, the information we share is purely for information sharing purposes. It is not prescriptive. It's not meant to direct on how you take your medicine or live your life. We share this information, and please discuss it with your primary care provider, your hepatologist or specialist before you make any decisions. Okay, next slide, please. So a lot of you are familiar with this slide that I often use. This is the gathering storm of MASH, MASLD and MASH. And this is the big looming public health threat because it's the convergence of so many chronic diseases that we experience in society: diabetes, metabolic syndrome, hypertension, high cholesterol, etc. It's also the leading cause of liver transplantation in women. There are variations in clinical diagnosis and management practices. Our health systems haven't quite been designed in a way that is amenable to multidisciplinary approaches, which is something that's critical when we have a disease like MASH and MASLD that requires a biopsychosocial approach. And to date, we only have one medication. And this is something I had to change on the slide because a year and a half ago, there were no medications for the treatment of this. And that was a huge contributory factor to this gathering storm that we had. But lo and behold, next slide, please. The clouds may be parting and the sun might be coming through, and we think it might not be as big a storm as we had anticipated because we are seeing the emergence of multidisciplinary teams. We have resmetirom that has been the first approved drug. We have other mechanism of actions and classes of drugs coming into play. With the new nomenclature, we have a higher level of awareness, better management of comorbidities, non-invasive tests. And yet with all these interventions, we have to always look at the risk profile, those lifestyle, dietary, exercise factors. Next slide, please. And with that, we feel that we are just at the tip of the iceberg. For those that are diagnosed with MASLD and MASH, and when we look at the public health data, we are talking about the tens, if not close to hundreds of millions of people in the United States that may be having this silent disease. And so at the bottom of the iceberg is that cohort or the population of undiagnosed MASLD MASH, and that's the true burden of disease. So we feel like we've only just begun. Next slide, please. So we're delighted to have Bill, who's the CEO of Madrigal Pharmaceuticals. Bill has phenomenal experience in the pharmaceutical industry, bringing products to market. And it is not just a biotechnology and scientific endeavor, but it is an access. How do you get it to people? It's one thing having the drug, but you got to make sure you get it to people in a sustainable way. And Bill brings that wealth of experience to this field. And we have Chris Freites, who is the Vice President of Corporate Communications and Patient Advocacy at Madrigal. Many of us in the patient community have a day-to-day working relationship with Chris. So between the two of them, we can get the strategic vision as well as some of those tactical day-to-day activities that Chris is involved with us. Okay. So with that, Tiff, I think we can get off the PowerPoint. Okay. Welcome, Bill and Chris, once again.
Great to be here.
Excellent. You're very welcome. So, as the patient community, we're all about love and care. So let's start off with that. How are the two of you feeling? And how do you feel where we are in this global response? Not to mention with the rapid growth that you've had in the past year and what must be a really frenetic pace within the company.
Yeah, look, it is an incredibly encouraging time, as you said. I mean, for the first time, I think there's light that's shining upon the field. And it's been a long, long road to get here. As you know, there's been, not for the sake of trying, I think people understood and understand the high unmet need and the burden of the disease. But it's been really, really hard to try to solve or come up with a solution. And, there were 23 failures in the space, which is really, I mean, I've been in the industry a long time. It's hard to equate this with anything else. So the fact now that there are therapies available, the fact that there's more research and development going on than probably there's ever been, I think it provides great hope for the future. And it's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to take some time. And we're on the right path now. And I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. I think patients should be optimistic. I think society should be optimistic because this is a high burden, as you pointed out in your slide, to all of society. So, I think we're just at the beginning in many ways after a very long journey, but we're at the next phase of the journey, which I think is a lot brighter than the last 20 years. So I'm excited, and it's great to be a part of this community. It's a community that cares so much. It's a community that wants to work together and collaborate. And I really believe that when you have great collaboration between the various stakeholders, you can move mountains. And I think we've started that. So I couldn't be anything. I couldn't tell you anything other than maybe a little exhausted, but optimistic as can be.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I would share that, Bill. And I just think, just in parallel with all the excitement developments in the field, I think the strengthening of the patient advocacy community has been really remarkable. And I trace a lot of that back to, of course, the Fatty Liver Foundation and Wayne, really the first patient advocacy group totally dedicated to this disease. And to see us go from, events with the patient advocacy community with kind of three or four leaders in an advisory board or a listening session to now huge auditoriums full of patients sharing their perspective about the future of MASH. That's really exciting, and I think that's really healthy for the future.
That's wonderful. There has certainly been, and just in the past 3 or 4 years, a sea change in the level of engagement. And Bill, I really like the point you raised about this community and this collaboration among stakeholders. So it's been interesting because the two of you came onto Madrigal kind of like at phase two, phase three in the process of the trials. And from the time you came in, and it may be as a result of where it was in the timing of the trial, the level of patient engagement has just really amped up and accelerated and deepened. And could you tell us about that? What was the impetus? How was this? Because this is our sort of lifeblood, patient engagement as the Fatty Liver Foundation.
Chris, why don't you start? You've had a longer perspective than I have.
Yeah, when I joined Madrigal, we were deep in the heart of our phase three program. So the Maestro NASH trial, our pivotal phase three trial, was underway. And of course, these trials were just getting going during the COVID era. So there was a lot of hard work done by Madrigal and all the investigators and all the people in the community that were supporting those trials to kind of deliver really highly anticipated phase three data at the end of 2022. So it was a very kind of robust program. In addition to that pivotal trial, we also, I think this was an important milestone for the full community, especially for the patient community. We had a fully non-invasive safety trial, the Maestro NAFLD trial, and we continue to generate really important learnings from that trial. So we joined right in the heart of this moment that we were preparing for our phase three data. And there had been so many, as Bill mentioned, so many disappointments in the field. I had been at another company working very hard in MASH before I had joined Madrigal and had delivered a lot of bad news in forums like this to patient advocates about some of the setbacks. So there was a ton of anticipation when we joined, but also questions just about what this would all look like and the challenge in front of everyone in terms of really helping all the stakeholders understand the unmet need, helping to engage the community, educating providers who'd never had an approved MASH treatment before. So there were all these questions hanging out there, and that's right when you joined Build to come in and start to try to answer some of these questions or start to kind of move the field in a direction where we had a model for actually bringing a treatment to patients.
Yeah, I think, the work that Chris and team had done was really quite a remarkable foundation. At probably the darkest times, to have stayed connected. And I think that, this is this whole notion of partnership and community. Partnership and community isn't just in good times, it's in the bad times too. And I think that's truly where the biggest gains are made in building the trust in the community. And, as I said, Chris had been there in some pretty dark days. I came in as I think we were just starting to emerge. We had just filed with the FDA for approval. So there was, strong belief that the product would get approved. So we start to move more towards the reality of a potential therapy and how do we interact with the community in that phase, which is, hopefully approval and launch. And I think that is a really important time because everyone's looking how you are going to behave. Are you behaving as a good partner or are you there as a transaction? And I've always believed in my career that this is, as I keep coming back to this theme of being partners rather than there being a transaction. And when we enter this phase, I think having principles and a philosophy is important, and that is what you communicate to the community. And then you're ultimately going to get measured against that to see whether you ultimately earn the trust. Even if it starts out high, it can disappear quickly and it takes time. And I think we were very clear in our interest in engaging with the advocacy community and broader MASH community overall. And, we've tried to show that in the way that we've educated, in the way that we've certainly launched, and the way that we've wanted to support patients throughout their journey. Not with the intent ever of selling a drug, but with the intent of how can we be a valuable partner with patients and with the whole community to get better outcomes, regardless of how they may achieve that outcome. So I think you have to start with that philosophy. And that's what, I fortunately, Chris and I are really completely aligned. It's so nice to see that we both have that same philosophical approach. So it just made it more of a continuation of the great work that was done rather than, okay, now let's start doing something differently. It's just weird. It was the context change where you're getting close to a therapy and ultimately launching.
That's great. So I'm also cognizant that we have attendees from all different sectors. So from companies, from the patient community, I think some academia as well. But our main focus is from the patient perspective, and I'm sure people are interested in the company on so many levels. So I'm gonna sort of stick to our lane from a patient perspective and a patient engagement point of view. Um, and so let's look at this from a downstream and upstream point of view. And at the Fatty Liver Foundation, we've been advocating for patient engagement from early research and development. And that's sort of on the upstream. So you can't go back in time, but surely you'll have further R&D. And now looking at downstream on access, because we have to get to the patients. What are your plans on engaging the patient community on those two particular areas?
Well, look, let me start with just kind of philosophically, not even philosophically, practically.
Right.
In the biopharma industry, there's only three things that matter, that really drive success. First of all is innovation, innovative products, innovative technology, innovation. Secondly is being able to manufacture that innovation. You can have the greatest, if you can't scale it up and make it available to people, or if you can't do it at a high quality, you don't have anything. The third is access for patients. You can have the best technology, but if patients can't access it, then it's really for naught. And oftentimes, people talk about all the various complexities in an industry and so forth. When I think of this one, I think of those three key pillars. So, two of the three were complete by the time we finish approval. Now it's how do we make sure the product gets to people? We move to the philosophical piece here. We want equitable access for patients. We don't want one group to have the option to get this product and another group not. So we take that very seriously. Everything from how do you initially price, and we looked at things from a cost effective using an independent third party, what was considered to be of good value to patients and society. We did that number one, but we know that this is a complicated system. There's a lot of great parts to it. There's challenging parts to it. And some people get disproportionately um, uh, caught up in it and don't get access. So what we did is look across the various groups and put that into commercial patients with commercial insurance, patients that are on government insurance, for instance, Medicaid, Medicare, and then uninsured. And we have programs across all three to help. For a commercial patient, if they choose, they can access our copay assistance and pay as little as $0 per month. That's about as good as it gets, right? With uninsured patients, we have a free goods program. For Medicare patients, we certainly have done everything to make the product available, and we will also, we support charitable foundations to help them. Or if they can't access product after trying, if they can't access the drug, then we can make it available to them for free as well. Now, what we make the commitment to the community that if there is a patient that needs this therapy, and that's what the patient and prescriber have decided, that will help with our Madrigal patient services group to try to identify opportunities for them to access the product through their insurance, et cetera. If they can't, we will provide it for free. We're not going to let the system or any of these challenges get in the way of somebody getting access to a therapy that can help them. And I think that, that's where we start philosophically is we want to make the product available for people. Now, fortunately, we've had really, really strong access. We've had a great partnership with the payers. And, most people have been able to navigate the complexity of the system to obtain the product when they needed it. But there's still others that haven't, and that's where we've been available to help. And again, to me, that is part of a commitment by us as a company and just being a good partner to the community overall.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Bill, that oftentimes when we're troubleshooting a patient access challenge, the first time we hear it, it's bubbling up from the patient advocacy community. So that was very helpful in the early days of the launch when we were putting all of our Madrigal patient support services into place. We captured that feedback from the experience that patients were have, and we're always trying to fine tune and troubleshoot if there's any patient that's having a challenge.
That's right. And one of the things which is, I think, unique, what we did before we even launched the product, we had a call with a large group of patient advocates and explained to them what was going to happen when we would launch, what was going to be our strategy for access, even how much we were going to be charging for the product. And remember, there's a difference between what the price is and what affordability is for a patient. We've really worked on the affordability and the pricing side as well. But it's not too often that you have that type of engagement. But again, it was another show of our commitment to work with the community and that there would be no surprises and that we could answer any questions. And I remember the day, Chris, very well when we had that call. That was right around approval. And, it was one of the memorable meetings of certainly my experience here and of my career.
Um, so the two of you have laid that out very well. And very often the reductionist question is, why isn't there a drug? Or if there is a drug, why can't I get it? And I think everything that you've laid out is so important because it's a complex process. And when we are in the business of healthcare, we have to be doubly, triply careful on what we're doing. So I think you've laid that out very well for our patient community. So I do want to ask, so then we come to a bit more of the details, and we get this from our patient community. Where can they get the drug? Who can prescribe it? Who's eligible for it? And I think you guys have covered this quite a bit, I think, but for the sake of completeness of this webinar, and it will be recorded so people can go through it, I think that's important for us to cover in this webinar.
Well, shall I start, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
Or
think we can also start with just the indication of the medication bill if you want to
yeah,
remind
go ahead.
people.
Go ahead, and then I'll talk about some of
Yep.
the practical pieces.
So the medication is for patients with MASH with moderate to advanced fibrosis. So that's kind of consistent with fibrosis stages F2 and F3, and it's for adult patients. So that's the kind of population, and it's indicated. This is really important, and we've talked about this before, Niraj. It's independent. It's indicated in conjunction with diet and exercise. So it's not a substitute. We want it to be used together as kind of part of a patient's full treatment plan. So that's really, I think, the first important thing is just to remind people what the medication was approved for based on the studies that demonstrated how it works.
Okay. So then maybe talking a little bit about how a patient would go about getting it. Well, we have focused on liver specialists, really, which tends to be hepatologists and gastroenterologists. That's been the key group of prescribers that we've spoken with. And usually what happens is a patient will be at a primary care doctor and have either a lab finding that would lead to a referral to one of these specialists for additional workup to see and to confirm a diagnosis of MASH F2, F3. Then it's a dialogue, obviously, with the patient to explain to them the disease and their willingness, interest to initiate a medication. When we talk about being with those prescribers, it extends as well to within those practices, nurse practitioners and physician's assistants as well. And that's a group that's highly engaged and involved in patient care. And so we spend time with them as well. So we have about, to give you a sense of scale, about 14,000 prescribers that we go out and talk with, have our teams visit, educate. We try to help if somebody needs one of the non-invasive tests. We will help locate if the prescriber doesn't have, if the physician or I should say healthcare professional doesn't have access to one of the liver stiffness measures. We can help with that. We actually will, if a patient needs to have that reimbursed, we can help with the reimbursement and have the patient not experience that expense. So we'll help with the diagnosis, and we'll also then help with the patient as they navigate through the insurance system to ensure that they get product, or as I said, if they have challenges with it, what are the various programs we have that can help them?
And through that process, and it's amazing, 14,000 prescribers that you have. What are the coverage levels that you have now on people that are on treatment, and what are your projections for 2026?
Yeah, I've been in the industry a long time. And this is as good access as I've ever had for a product. It's actually quite remarkable. And I think that it tells me two things. One, that there's acknowledgement of the seriousness of the disease. Two is that this is a product that adds value because the payers understand how expensive it is as people get sicker and sicker. God forbid somebody's headed towards a transplant, that's really expensive. So payers have been very, very supportive of making the product available. And so, as I said, that you can be as little as $0 copay with our assistance for commercial patients. I think Medicaid patients pay about $13 per month. And then with Medicare patients, depending on their plan design, it varies. But they also have access to other instruments to help them, such as charitable foundations and so forth, to help offset costs. And then again, of course, there is the possibility of a free product program, provided somebody qualifies and has kind of exhausted the opportunities that exist with their current plans.
And do you have patient coverage numbers at the moment?
How do you mean?
How many people are on treatment?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Well, we
Yeah,
just
yeah.
announced about once every 3 months when we have to update our quarterly earnings, we have been releasing the patient numbers. And as of December 31st, there were over 36,250 people on the product, which is, really fantastic. I mean, it's just think about, and I just want to tell you one story from AASLD in November. We have a booth that we display at, and a physician came running up to me, said, Bill, I've got to tell you a story. And I said, great, what is it? And it's about a patient. Well, sure, anything about a patient I want to hear. I had a patient who was F3 that went to F1. And I was like, wow, that is remarkable. And again, that's one example. So that's just, be clear. This is one physician's experience. And I said, well, what about the other patients? And he goes, well, they either have gone back to F2 or they're stable. And it was almost that's good. And I said, just stop and think about where we were 2 years ago. There was nothing. And now there's a potential to have that type of an impact. And even halting progression or having one stage step back, or in the example he used two, it allows us to think differently about the treatment of the disease and the long-term prognosis for patients. And that is a great, great moment. And that's a great example, though, how innovation and all the efforts can lead to a different perspective on a disease. And that's why, I'm in this industry. I always say, I think this is the greatest industry in the world because if we do our job right and if we partner, you can transform, save, change lives around the world. And when you hear a story of just even if it's a single patient, that gives you that additional energy and drive to say, well, what are we going to accomplish next? And I think that's the stage that we're at with the treatment of MASH at this point.
That's truly an inspiring story, and those are the types of stories we profile on the Wellness League, and they become very inspiring for other patients as well as providers. When you look at the risk factor profile for developing MASLD and MASH, and these aren't static risk factors, they continuous and they dynamic, ongoing. Halting progression is a huge victory.
Yeah.
Reversing well, that's bonus, cherry on top stuff, right? And that's the world we live in with lifestyle diseases, particularly. We have a question, and it was actually quite interesting because in previous careers, I worked in HIV. And the
Mhm.
moment we found a treatment for HIV that turned it into a chronic disease instead of a death sentence, the immediate question then was, oh, is this going to be a cure? Right? And
Mhm.
I'm sure you get this as well. And the question is, do patients have to stay on this drug for life? have we seen patients get off the medication and continue to do well. And this is the sort of gray area between chronic management and reversal and cure, right?
Yeah, no, listen, it's a great question. And we are very much on the lead of innovation in the field, and we're learning a lot, and we're going to learn a lot more. Now, one of the interesting findings that we presented at the AASLD last year was in two of the trials that we have ongoing. In some cases, as we were doing this during COVID, et cetera, there were sometimes treatment interruptions. And when we looked at patients that had been having a response, they discontinued therapy for a period of time. The disease came back and came back very quickly. And then when they could initiate again, the disease came back into control, so to speak. So it appears as though interrupted therapy can lead to the disease returning. Now, if we look ahead and if the underlying contributors to the disease were ultimately managed, you could see a future where perhaps somebody would not be in need of therapy, but it's a little too early to tell. I mean, we have, over 36,250 patients that were on December 31st. There's many more than that have been exposed in clinical trials, et cetera. But I think we're still going to learn. Our assumption at the moment is that people would stay on the therapy as long as all of the factors that are leading to the MASH continue. So we're going to learn more, and we'll report out on that as we do.
That's so important. And as patient advocates, one of the first things we tell our patients is you've got to get your comorbidities under good control and management. And part of that is this whole multidisciplinary approach. And starting to see these centers pop up, these multidisciplinary centers. And it's complex management because you're dealing with human psychology, emotion, physiology, metabolism, etc., all that in one, which we had set up in silos according to specialty. So we're starting to address the patient more in a more holistic way. But what we also learned is that human psychology stuff is, oh, don't tell me about all those things I have to change about my life. Just give me the pill.
Yeah.
And Chris, you alluded to this as well. How do we get this balance of promoting those lifestyle changes, risk factor reduction, comorbidity management, while we have effective treatment?
Niraj, I think that's really where the patient community can be particularly powerful, and groups like the Fatty Liver Foundation. I mean, we will certainly do our role as a company to try to promote healthy lifestyle and all the wraparound care that a patient really needs with MASH. And you outlined it. There's a lot of different needs. That's why we've been, pretty proud to support the Wellness League, which I know provides a lot of those services. But yeah, it all goes back to healthy lifestyle, diet and exercise, and customizing that. There's no one size fits all approach to lifestyle change. And I think that's where the patient community can really help us learn and really help encourage and bring people more on that journey.
And maybe just one point to this as well. I agree 100%. This is what we have to do. It is multifactorial. Many people have to be involved, et cetera. However, we also have to understand at the moment somebody moves in to this F2, F3 diagnosis, that they are on a path which isn't a good path. They're 1 to 2 steps away from cirrhosis. And I think we have to find that balance. A lot of these people have, through their whole life, used their best efforts. If they have any weight loss that's needed, they have tried and tried and tried, and they've been told for years, you know what, lose some weight. That is a really tough thing when you've been trying. And what we want to make sure is that we also treat the issue which is at hand, which is now the liver is on a dangerous path. And I think it is an and rather than an or. It's always going to be the and that let's help with the danger imposed to the liver and the person, and also help be supportive of how can we make any other changes and provide any other support along the way for the long term. But I think it's an and you know, we feel very strongly that, you know, we want to be advocates to help with this acute liver problem and make sure that they have that choice.
Um, that's so important, and we look forward to partnering with you on this. Um, you know, in the middle of a trial, to go through a nomenclature change and sort of reclassification of disease. Oh, and I can't tell you the impact it had on us. I mean, we're the Fatty Liver Foundation and we rebranding to Steatotic Liver Foundation. Just in the change of name, there's so much to deal with. But I can't imagine what it must have been like for you guys going through that with the nomenclature change, the classification change, etiology changes. How has that journey been? And what are the implications now that you're dealing with this? And something that's come up quite often with our patients is they have F3 with bridging fibrosis and F4. And what are the implications for them moving forward to be considered as candidates for treatment?
Yeah, look, there's a lot in that question. Maybe I'll we can get to it, and I'm sure you know, remind me if I've missed a piece of it. You know, yeah, we were again, you know, we're at a little bit of the tip of the spear here in being innovators, and you know, we're many of the learnings we're the ones that are going through it for the first time. And yeah, in the middle of a review, as the nomenclature changes, you know, we were locked in with the FDA with the former NASH designation, and you know that's what our indication says. And you know, sometimes the nomenclature moves ahead of regulatory process and so forth, and you know one will follow. What we really adopted was more of a hybrid to make sure that people that were on the journey of converting from saying NASH to MASH, that we met them where they were at. And if they said it was NASH, we would talk about NASH. If it was MASH, MASH. And even though the field has moved to MASH now, the occasional NASH slips, and I'll even say I have the occasional NASH slips. You know, you kind of it becomes so ingrained in the mind. So, you know, we're working with the community. We're updating where we can update any materials that were old remaining, et cetera. So, you know, I think that it's still an evolution, but I'd say overall we've crossed that kind of Rubicon to MASH at this point. Chris, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say so, Bill. And you know, we always do these listening sessions with the patient community, and every time we bring this up, there's so much passion around it. And it is a lot to change, and you're going through this now, Fatty Liver Foundation, and thinking about what is the what does this mean for what we call our organization in the future. I will note this is actually the second disease that I've worked in that has been renamed actually in the hepatology space. So about a decade ago, primary biliary, what was then called primary biliary cirrhosis, became primary biliary cholangitis. So it seems to be something we like to do in liver disease, but even if the transition can be a little bit difficult, I think it does generate some dialogue, no matter what side of the debate you're on. And I think it's actually been a very healthy thing for the community to start to think about the disease in a different way.
Yeah. And then maybe on the cirrhosis side that you had asked the question. You know, look, clearly cirrhosis is extremely serious when a patient has progressed to cirrhosis. And I think with the story of MASH, there was attempts to intervene with patients that had developed cirrhosis. And that's where some of the failures started, certainly from a drug development perspective. So the field moved a little bit more towards F2, F3, moderate to advanced fibrosis, thinking that maybe there's you can intervene prior to moving all the way to cirrhosis. And that's where we started our development program. However, we also have a development program in F4C, or well-compensated cirrhosis. And that's a trial that we expect will read out in 2027. That's the plan. And if we saw positive results there, that could lead to the approval of patients with well-compensated cirrhosis. Now, in the meantime, our indication is only for F2, F3. So we have been very deliberate to ask the community, please don't use the product in patients with cirrhosis. We just don't have the results yet. And until we do, we don't want anyone using it there. We're doing it in a controlled setting, and we're going to find out the answer. If the answer is positive, great. We'll tell you how to use it there. If it's negative, then not so great, but we won't use it there. So I think we're in this moment of waiting to see what the impact is. But we're just very encouraged that there are products, including ours, that are looking at that very severe patient population. So it's exciting times, but I know the community has been incredibly patient and has been forced to be incredibly patient. And we're going to ask, please be a little bit more patient now. We're not too far off from starting to have answers. So, we're really, really hopeful that we'll have hopefully a solution, and others as well.
And Bill and Chris, I must say, it's really appreciated from the community side, the communication that comes out from the company, because we feel like we're part of the journey because you guys are keeping us informed all the time. Not knowing is the worst thing. You don't know if anything's happening. So we really appreciate that. We did get a question in that looks at a program specifically for truckers. Interestingly, at the Fatty Liver Foundation, we've identified them as a very high-risk group for this disease. And it'll be interesting because when we look at an access program for truckers, we have to develop our messaging that's very unique for that cohort and population. But on the back end of it, and I think this is one of the greatest things where the availability of treatment has given us legitimacy for an education and awareness campaign. Because so often, even doctors said, well, why should I test for it if there's nothing to do about it? Kind of thing. So I'd love for us to explore how we can look at targeted groups like truckers, which incidentally happens to be the highest employer of males in the United States. So it's a huge cohort that we have to deal with. But that's the type of collaboration and partnership that would be really exciting to explore.
Yeah, I think that is just a great example. One of the things that we have to consider with the diagnosis and treatment of this disease is time. Not everyone's going to be able to be diagnosed tomorrow, which is a shame. We want to help people get on their path to recovery as quickly as possible, however they choose to do so. But with many diseases, it can take sometimes decades for there to be good awareness, diagnosis, and ultimately treatment. And we have to work together, again, back to the community, is how can we try to accelerate that time, or condense that time is really what I mean, so that we don't have to wait the decades to get there. And I think it has to be on a number of fronts. We need to have, better diagnostics if we can, more widely available. Can we screen people on a broad scale to identify the highest at risk to then have additional testing done so that we can get to a diagnosis? And so there's a big technology play as well here, where as we advance the technology to be able to identify, that will lead to diagnosis and hopefully treatment. Now, that doesn't mean that we just throw our hands up and just wait, but I think in many cases, what helps is starting at the end and working back, saying, so, you want to be able to have this be in guidelines so that it's automatic that people get tested. You want to have the right technology to test, and you want to have the right pathway for patients if they're detected. How are they going to be educated and ultimately treated and followed? So if we start with, if we go all the way to something like Hep C, which evolved over decades, and now it is, just much more standard on how diagnosis would take place, et cetera. How do we take learnings from other diseases and try to apply them to MASH so that we condense that period? And that's something that we've got to work on now, specifically as it relates to truckers. I think, are there ways to set up screening areas where people are going to be passing through? That's one of the things that could be considered. Probably what gives me the most confidence about that is last year at the EASL meeting in Amsterdam, probably the most memorable part of the meeting, and one of the most memorable moments, I have to say, in my career at any kind of medical meeting, was they had liver stiffness measure screening in front of the Congress Center. And it was free. And I think they had 4 trucks that people could go into for one of the scans. And there were lineups of 2 hours plus that you would walk by, literally hundreds of people that were interested in finding out the condition of their liver. And it was just such a visual in front of a liver meeting. And it really stuck with me. So, there are opportunities, could you have a portable machine that where truckers were a place that they would go through, and if they were amenable to it, that could be a screening location. I think ultimately we have to get to a wide scale blood test that can quickly stratify the highest risk, and then we go down. But I know there's a lot in that answer, but just to give you a sense for, we have this problem/opportunity in front of us. We're at the very beginning. It takes some strategic thinking about how we work together to define the end result and work backwards and try to condense. That's in a nutshell.
That's a beautiful answer. And someone just posted, another important cohort, which is the military and the veterans.
Yeah.
And what's good about them is they have an institutional structure or infrastructure that can be tapped into. It reminds me of Wayne's first program, the Sun study, which was the screening of undiagnosed NAFLD and NASH. And I call it guerrilla screening. They literally went onto the street and pulled people off the street and gave them a screen. And one of the most important things Wayne talks about is that when they saw their printout, he refers to it as the teachable moment. There was a light bulb that went off and like, oh my God, I have to do something about this. And now we feel any screening has to have linkage to care. And we have tools now, so it's so much more important. So those are definitely things that we'll take to heart. I'm going to ask a tricky question that comes up with the patient community quite often. And it's the use of medications when they're taking other supplements. And, oh, my uncle tried this liver detox supplement or this herbal therapy or etc. And is there any concern that we should sort of raise in the patient community with the use of medications? And these are patients who probably have, multiple comorbidity medications as well that they take when it comes to these sorts of supplements.
Yeah, well, it's kind of timely. I was at an event last night honoring one of the founders of our company, and a elected official came up to me and asked this very question about a social media feed that he had been getting on liver health and supplements to take. And I will tell you what I told him, which is talk to your healthcare professional. It is very important to talk to an expert. That is the person who can best guide you on what you're taking and the evidence behind what you're taking or not, especially if they know all the different or any different medications or treatments that you're on. So, I can't say it enough. Please, please, please talk to healthcare professionals before you take anything for any health condition of yours.
I think that's perfectly put. Can't make blanket statements. Every patient is an individual, and their case needs to be considered on its own. So, Bill, in a recent interview, it was just eloquent the way you described it. MASLD is a heterogeneous disease requiring more than one solution. And it sounds like a corporate strategy to find different ways of actually dealing with this, because different people will respond differently. And also there may be synergies between drugs. So tell us what the future might look like.
Yeah, boy, this you might have to stop me here. I get a little excited sometimes about this, but I go back to what our purpose statement is as a company. It's leading the fight against MASH. And it says everything about the company in 5 words. First of all, MASH. We are a company that is dedicated to this disease. It's had a lot of companies that dabble in a lot of things. We want to be experts. We want to be the best. We want to go to the first route. We want to be the leaders in the space. And leadership isn't about sales results or market share. Leadership is about being the trusted partner that can advance the field, that people come to when they have questions, that they know whether it's not about a product, it's about the disease and just what do we know that may help them. And then we use the word fight because I think it takes a little bit of a gritty approach, especially in a field that we were in, which was unfortunately referred to as the graveyard of drug development because so many things had failed. So it's taken a now a fight to get to market. So I'll now transition to what's next for us. And we're in this really remarkable position to have been the leaders in the space to bring what we think is a great therapy to market. And we believe that it serves as the foundation in which we build care and future pipeline activities off of. Now, we think that we're really good in MASH and we're experts, but we don't know what we don't know. And we can't say with certainty that's going to work better than that or that or that. So what we've done over the last less than 12 months is we've put together a pipeline of over 10 additional products that will be dedicated towards MASH. And the goal is to test these in combination with our product that's already approved. Now you say, well, why would you do that? Well, because we've got something which seems to work very well across all subpopulations of patients, all subgroups of patients, works pretty much equally well. So if we add another mechanism to it, what might we see that's better for either the whole population or a subpopulation? So our vision is to have multiple other mechanisms of action to do studies in combination with our product and be able to quickly see what works and what doesn't work. And we know that based upon the history in the disease of a high degree of failure, we would expect some things to fail. Failure in this case may be that it looks no better, the combination, than our current product by itself. And so our goal is quite simple. Make a better drug, make a better therapy for all or for some. And that's what we plan to do. And I can't tell you of the 10 plus that we have if we're going to have, 10, 5, or 0 new medications that become available. But what I can tell you is we are going to look to see and to study these to see if we can find kind of that magic combo or series of combinations or regimen that is going to provide the best outcome for patients or a group of patients. And we think that under one roof, one company, we can do that in an extremely efficient way and then ultimately provide in an efficient way to the community whatever products come out of it. So that's the goal. And I mean, As I say, I've been in the industry a long time, and rarely do you ever get to a moment in your career where all of your observations, learnings, and experience leading up to that can be applied to a single opportunity. And it feels like everything that I've done previously has kind of led to this moment to be able to undertake a strategy like that and have assembled a company that allows you to do so. So, in a nutshell, that's the little bit that we're planning to be doing in the next little while.
Oh, we got to have a coffee and talk about it sometime. I got goosebumps about it because we've always talked about personalized medicine, right? And the more different mechanisms of action and therapeutics we have, the combination we can create for patients based on their individual profile, that's phenomenal,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's very rare is there like a single solution. And I think it's we really have to make that commitment to find what's better and who can do better. And our goal is how do we make somebody better rather than does one product do well? And that's a different view. And that requires all the capabilities. It requires partnering with the community. It requires all the things that we've talked about today.
Excellent. So, well, we stand ready to be by your side to smash and mash. There we go. But in the last minute, I want to give you a chance to give one wish for the field that you might have, both of you, and we'll wrap up with that. So, to put you
Sure.
on the spot, what's your wish?
Chris.
I mean, I'd love to just see an even larger, stronger patient community, not only in terms of its size, but its capabilities to really help us with some of these research and development challenges and really to provide that input as we're designing studies. So Bill just mentioned that we've gone from basically one medication to now a pipeline with 10 different programs. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity and frankly a lot of need to get that patient input into how these trials should be executed and designed, and really what's going to be most important for patients coming out of them. So that's my big wish.
My wish is just that all the stakeholders join arms, collaborate, partner, and work together in the same direction rather than fighting each other at all along the way. It's the only way we can make things happen. I think if we all join arms, we can make tremendous progress for the benefit of patients and ultimately for the benefit of society. And I believe that, but it's going to take a team effort, not just individually working in different directions.
Love it. I think the best thing about your two wishes are they totally doable, and it feels like we're on the trajectory for it. So with that, I just want to wrap up to say thank you so much for taking this time and engaging with the patient community and the support that you've offered. For all our participants, this webinar will be available for you to watch again. And please loop into our resources that are up on the screen. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Chris and Bill, thanks so much once again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Niraj.
Take good care. Cheers.